For the extra credit, we've got another little optimization that we can make here, and that is we get the user's information, but then we wait until that user's information comes back before we go to get the user's list items. And so we have a waterfall effect between those two requests. And it would be better if we make both of those requests at the same time, because if we have the user's token and they're logged in, we may as well get the user's username while we're getting all of the user's list items. And our backend developers understand this, so they've given us a special endpoint that we can hit. And that endpoint is called Bootstrap. This will get all of the data for the user that they typically need when they first land on our app. So if the user is logged in and we have a token, then we will call the Bootstrap endpoint, and the data that comes back here includes a user, and it also includes list items. But how do we get these list items to the components that need them? Well, remember, we're putting all of the list items in the query cache, so if we just insert these list items that we get from this Bootstrap endpoint into the query cache, then all of the components that are using list items can pull that out of the cache right away. So I'm going to come up here and import the query cache from React Query, and then I'll say query cache, set query data. We'll use the query key for these list items, which is simply list items. And then here's the value we want to set into the query cache. And now if we save this, come back over here, we'll see that we load all the JavaScript, and now we hit this Bootstrap endpoint, and that gets all the data that we need to render the rest of the app. Now you'll notice we're also making another request here for list items, and this is because React Query by default is going to go validate that the data it has in its cache is up to date. Now if you don't want it to do that, then you can add an additional argument here to say the stale time and set it to something like 5 seconds. Now if we come back here, we'll see we load all of the data with Bootstrap, and then we don't get a request to get the list items. So in review, what we did here is we updated our getUser to call the Bootstrap endpoint instead, which will not only give us the user, but also give us the user's list items as well. And then we can use that to set that into the query cache so that any component that uses those list items will have immediate access to them rather than having to request them. And then we prevented React Query from attempting to update that cache for 5 seconds so that our components have time to render and display that data without React Query bothering to update that data, without React Query automatically assuming that data is stale.